41-13 is the final. Michigan gets it done tonight, Sam. A pretty dominant performance by the Wolverines. Had some stagnant times there at the end of the first half, but Michigan gets it done in the end. 335 yards passing from J.J. McCarthy. About four rushing touchdowns from this Michigan Wolverine team. Blake Corn moves into second place for the all-time rushing touchdown lead. But there's still a lot of things that you can dissect from this game. Let's start with the offense. What were some of your observations?
So, the kind of game you see sometimes coming off a bye week, not really clicking on all cylinders. That first drive was really, really good. It had a few big plays in there. The reverse to Cornelius obviously put him on the doorstep. JJ talked about, he said there are some passes that he missed. And he still wound up with a really, really good passing day, yardage wise. What do you say, 335?
Yeah.
That he finished with. So, not so good for JJ is great for a lot of people. You got to remember that. But I think his standard is, man, he was throwing it through a Cheerio with his eyes closed. That's how things were going for him before the break. So I think the glass half full perspective is you got some rust off before you got to go to Penn State, right? And then even with some of the misses, you still had some of those wild plays. That back shoulder that he threw to Colston Loveland in the third quarter was one that really stuck out to me. It's like, okay, he's still going to have those that are really pinpoint accurate. He's a guy that you got to account for, and they didn't even use. There's so much that they left in the playbook. Like, you didn't see him involved in the run game. That's going to be on display against Penn State. So, for a team coming off a bye week, for a team with a lot of distractions.
Absolutely.
I think you got to give them credit for, even though Purdue is not a great team. Think about everything that's swirling around this team. Sign gate. Is your coach going to be suspended or worse? All that stuff is flying around. You can see, and it's coming off a bye. Mm-hmm. You can see how that could maybe have a little more subdued performance, and yet they still go out and score 40 points.
I guess a lot of people, Harbaugh was asked this in the post game. I know the players really aren't going to speak to this, but is there any concerns with the rush game, the rushing attack? So really not. Besides the big run from Morgan, who's been a spark plug for him, they really aren't. They're really not hitting those big runs that they had last year.
So, is it concern, or is it okay? You just have a picture of what they are.
Yeah.
So no, my point is, it's a concern if you think they are what they were last. I just don't think that they are the same rushing attack that they were last year.
Clearly, they're not that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question is it good enough to win? Is it good enough to win with? I think it's good enough to win with. Remember, a huge part of their running game as it evolved over the course of the season is J.J. McCarthy involved in the run game. J.J. is a run threat on some of those read plays. He is a threat to pull it, hit the flanks, or just actually design QB runs. When you don't put that in the equation, the teams can sell out to kind of slow you down. And this is not proven to be a rushing attack that is just going to plow over teams, even when they even when they load the ball, even when they sell out to stop you. So how do you balance the equation? The way they balance the equation is not, just running over them and blocking 2-3 guys. That's the great thing about last year's offensive line is, they were good at the point, but you could have one guy go out and routinely block 2, routinely block movement, right? A guy on a twist and another guy shows in your hole. That guy's not leaking. That was routine last year. It's not as routine this year. So, what are they? What are you? They are more of a team this year that is quarterback dependent. Last year was more of an offense that was run game dependent. Is the run game good enough to keep teams honest, good enough to hit some plays here and there when you need them? I think the answer is yes, especially when you have J.J. McCarthy. There's a reason why that reverse and that jet sweep, there's a reason why that worked, why those plays work, right? They're selling out to stop you on the inside. So Cornelius coming around on the reverse, it's like, man, and then when Samaj came around the corner, they were still looking inside. The DBs to the sweep side were still looking inside. Right. So a couple of cracks and he didn't even get touched till he got to the goal line. So imagine J.J. McCarthy a few more times in the run game where he pulls it or he's a threat to pull it. That opens up some things on the inside. They didn't show that tonight. They'll show it against Penn State.
We'll get to Penn State here in a moment, our breakdown there. Obviously, we got to switch to the defensive side of things. Michigan's just sort of handles their business on the defensive side, sort of just plug and play. They just do their thing. I know they gave up the late touchdown, but really you got to like how they answered. Michigan got shut down on that 4th and 1. Still held Purdue to those 2 field goals in the first half and then the late score. Really they just consistently, they're the same defense every week.
Yeah, so their edge guys have just been imposing. And you mentioned that 3rd down play. So Michigan goes for it on 4th and 1. They get 2 guys, and this is kind of what 2 guys beat 2 offensive blockers across their face and stone them. But Harbaugh, Jim talked about it in the press conference, said you go for it there because you know your defense. You feel confident in your defense. If you don't get it, they're going to hold. And that's exactly what they did. It was Braden McGregor came around, got a key pressure. You know, you look back in the first quarter, there was a 3rd and 1. He came off the backside and stoned that play. And Jalen Harrell came free. He had 3 QB hurries in this game. They couldn't block. They couldn't block Harrell. They couldn't block Stewart. They couldn't block Derek Moore. They couldn't block Braden McGregor. It really showed up in the run game. They kept trying to run outside. They couldn't run outside zone. They couldn't hold their blocks. I mean, those guys were an absolute menace and a terror in this game. And it leads to some opportunities in the secondary because why did Will Johnson, first of all, it's Will, sticky coverage. Will look like Will.
Yep.
Will look like the Will of last year.
Yeah.
He's back, man. He was in Deion Burks. Deion Burks is a good receiver. Like, he's not all Big Ten, but he's a good receiver. And Will was in his hip pocket all night long. And on that interception, you know, Harrell comes on, they run a TE stunt, and Harrell is free going to the quarterback, and the quarterback card throws off his back foot, and it should be an incomplete, but Will is like this. He's like he's in his hip pocket, so he's ready to pick it off. They had a scramble drill. Deion Burks comes back to the football. Will's in his hip pocket. And then he's a force in the run game. So he was making plays there. He would have had a 2nd interception if Rob Moore doesn't knock it out from in front of him. So point is, pressure, coverage work hand in hand. And when you got a guy that can stick like glue and pressure that's getting there routinely, that's music. That's a match made in heaven, man. They're making music out there on defense.
All right, let's switch it up to a little bit of, obviously, a lot of all the speculation and accusations, everything that's surrounding this Michigan football team that's non-football, not about the game, but actually about the accusations. Obviously, the Purdue coach had some bold statements to say prior to the game. Harbaugh said there was no difference of a handshake or whatever, but sort of was very curt, very firm about his response there. Did you inspect anything there? Did you notice anything there?
I didn't. I mean, I think they wanted to pile drive him. They weren't able to beat him as bad, but they beat him bad. So I mean, you sent the message. There were no signs stolen, and you still got blown out, right? So that's kind of the message that keeps going across the board. Michigan State, you didn't steal any signs. They got blown out, right? And as if Michigan needed to steal signs to beat any. It's like you need to steal signs to beat East Carolina. I mean, we're talking Big Ten teams. So you need steal signs to beat Rutgers. Did Michael Jordan have to spy on Michael Curry? No, he didn't. Like, you don't have to steal signs to beat these teams. So, I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about the difference. If you think it's that big of an advantage, maybe Michigan doesn't beat you by 4 touchdowns. They beat you by 3 and a field goal, right?
And you got to go back to what Harbaugh said in the post game. He's like, he sort of addressed it in his own Harbaugh type way, saying that Michigan just has really good players. Yeah. And that's one thing that's sort of getting overlooked here. And with all these sign stealing accusations.
Well, so, listen, everybody has a sign stealer guy. So let's just start. I mean, they're making this out to be the worst offense in the history of the Big Ten. That's the premise of how hard they're coming after Jim Harbaugh. That there's never been a scandal this bad. When you're talking about a practice that is commonly practiced, it is not against the rules to steal signs. I mean, let's equate it to a law, right? So you go to rob a bank. You rob a bank with a gun. You rob a bank with a knife. You rob a bank with your finger like this. It's all a crime, right? It's all a crime. You steal signs in game, it's fine. You steal signs at a game that you are playing in, it's against the rules. So you're talking about the method and not the practice, right? Yeah. Just how you do it or where you do it. Not even how. Where you do it is the issue. And this is this is a bigger issue than buying players. It makes no sense. If it's player safety, then man, it's a whole lot of athletic directors and coaches that need to be fired if player safety is a function or part of the issue when it comes to stealing plays, stealing signs, because they do it every game. Look at last year's Illinois-Michigan game. Last year's Illinois-Michigan game, Ryan Walters, who talks about, they're out here stealing signs. So, and I'm a Ryan Walters fan, but he's talking about it and he's standing on the sideline with two dudes next to him. He has Danny Cameron next to him, and then he has a former Michigan guy and Greg Fralick next to him as well. What are they doing? Whispering sweet nothings? I mean, what is that all about? And then you notice Michigan, in that game, they start huddling. You think they just think huddles are sexy? Like, why are they huddling all of a sudden? They huddling because they know you're stealing their signs, because you know what? It's legal. Everyone does it. So if we're just hung up on the method, then punish them for the method. But it's not a death penalty-like offense. And that's how the Big Ten came up in Ann Arbor this week. Like, we want you to suspend Jim Harbaugh indefinitely? Are you crazy? Are you insane? What kind of sense does that make? For stealing signs. And you want us to do it. So we think you should defend. No. If you think that that's what's warranted, then you do it. And then let's do battle at that point.
Force the Big Ten's hand here. You can't make Michigan do it. Can't make President Santa Ona do it. Got to make the Big Ten make a move. And
let's just come back to, why aren't any of these schools talking about how this information was attained in the first place? So we want to make it okay for opponents to hire PI firms to investigate other opponents. We want that to become the norm. None of them are talking about that. This is what is so revealing to me. No one's talking about that. But there's a consensus on the other side with all the other schools in the Big Ten that this is the worst thing they've ever seen. That's just a stand-in for, we don't like Jim Harbaugh. That's what this is really about. And I'm not sitting here saying that if Michigan violated the rules that they don't deserve punishment. They absolutely do. Just like I said, listen, when they had an analyst coaching and they had COVID recruiting violations, I mean, they deserve a punishment, but it's a ticket, not jail time. And that's what we're talking about here. I mean, this is not the death penalty like offense.
I mean, can I throw a hypothetical? If you think that schools were allowed to hire PI firms to investigate all their rivals, how much things do you think they would find? I know that I'm not on the circuit anymore, but we follow recruiting. I'm just saying, I've heard some things. I've seen some things. I think things would be found out. So I think that's why you're seeing the SEC schools not really say anything about this.
They don't like Jim Harbaugh, and this is the pretext that they're using to try to move him out. So, I think if you're Michigan, you put the ball in their court. You say, hey, if this is what you want to do, then you do it, or we dare you to do it. And if that's the action you take, then guess what? Guess what we're going to do? We're going to sue. We'll see you in court. Let's go.
I know you're fired up, Sam. I know you've had a long night. I want to ask you one last thing. We're going to get a couple minutes anyways on this. It's finally here. Michigan's finally going to play a legit football team, right? Because they haven't played anybody the whole year. What are your early thoughts on the Nittany Lions?
So, really physical defense. They really get after you with their pass rush. They have some good guys in the secondary. I don't think their secondary is as good as last year, but pressure and coverage work well together over there. And Manny Diaz is a pressure coach. Like, he's going to bring the house. So you got to be prepared to pick up blitzes. You got to be prepared to make some improv plays. Mm-hmm. And in the run game, Michigan did a great job of blocking movement, of blocking some of those blitzes. And when they got a hat on the hat and they accounted for every man, they had some big plays in the run game. Both Blake and Donovan went for over 100 yards last year. I think Michigan wins this game convincingly, but in a different way. I don't look for them to just run it down their throats to the tune of 300 yards, but I think J.J. McCarthy's going to have a huge day. I think the quarterback disparity in this game is enormous. We watched Drew Aller all season. He's just not ready for primetime. You move him off his spot, he has real trouble. And you remember when James Franklin was acting all weird when they said, how come you don't just try more downfield passes? Don't you think you should just give it a shot? And he was like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with that question. Like, they asked him if he can't do it. Yeah, it was like they were asking him if he wears Speedos or something like that. It's like, man, I mean, they just asking you why you're not throwing a ball down the field. He was uncomfortable because he knows that is not his quarterback's strong suit, right? So get some heat on him, and they have problems. He just can't make as many plays as J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy plays the way that he's played all season. Michigan will win this game by double digits.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. Michigan has a first-round quarterback. Penn State doesn't. Well, hey, that's going to wrap up our coverage here from Michigan Stadium. For Sam Webb, I'm Josh Newkirk for the MichiganInsider.com.